Are Piggyback tuners worth it, and will they actually make power on your car? What's going on, everybody? It's Charles. In this video, we're going to be installing a JB4 Piggyback box using a Mark 8 Golf R. Even though we're doing this on the Mark 8 Golf R, this should pretty much apply to everything across the board. Regardless of the car, the way Piggyback tuners work is intercepting signals from different sensors on the engine, changing the parameters, and then reporting back the new parameter to the ECM. This is our pigtail for the map sensor on top of the intake manifold. We unplug the map sensor, plug this side of the connector into the sensor, and then the ECM harness into this side. And as you can see, there's 3 wires that just go from one connector to the other, and 1 wire that goes into the harness of our tuner. This is the wire that reports the information to the tuner box, then the tuner box sends it back out on this wire. And that's pretty much applicable for the sensors that we have. There is one different one, the charge pressure sensor here. This also powers our tuner box. Installation on this is pretty straightforward. We're going to disconnect each of the 4 sensors that we need to, plug in our little pigtail for our box, then we're gonna go to the dyno and see what kind of power this unit makes. Now, when we look at the difference between a Piggyback tuner and a proper ECM tune, there's of course gonna be pros and cons to both. And I'll tell you right up front, traditionally, I've not really been a fan of Piggyback tuners. So I'm coming in a little bit skeptical about the results of this tuner box. The 4 sensors we're gonna be tapping into are going to be the map sensor on the intake manifold, this 14-pin fueling connector, the turbine speed right at the turbocharger, and the charge pressure sensor that's somewhere down in this area. Couple of things right off the bat that I'm not in love with. 1, the kit didn't come with any zip ties to secure the wiring around the rest of the factory harness. That's a pretty minor thing, really, but boy oh boy, wouldn't it be nice if there was about 10 zip ties in this kit so that we could get everything properly secured. Which brings me to my next thing, is you have this box now that you have to do something with, store it either under the cowl or under the hood. I'm not sure if there's really the perfect place to house this box, so it often just gets kind of tucked near the battery. The other thing that really kind of bugs me is the initial cost gives you only 1 map, which is great, but in order to really get the benefit of the box and different maps and things like that, you have to either buy a $40 cable to hook up to your laptop, or you have to buy a $150 Bluetooth connector so you can connect it to your phone. That puts this kit with that Bluetooth add-on at $700, not including tax. So let's just say I'm pretty excited to see where our dyno numbers land. First thing I'm gonna do is take the vehicle battery out. We'll go ahead and take the intake and the battery tray out as well. I think that's gonna make life a little easier. Next up is probably the worst part of this entire job, and that's running the wire from the OBD2 port up to the box under the hood. I moved a handful of things out of the way so that I could show you guys a little bit better. You don't really need to take this stuff off in order to run the wires. Initially, I was gonna run it through the harness that actually goes through the body of the car anyway. However, I found a place that I don't love what I had to do this, but I think it's actually a bit easier. So if you pull up this padding here just a little bit, yeah, you kind of got to rip it. You probably could do it without ripping it, but this stuff's so fragile that looking at it wrong, pretty much gonna tear. Just below where the harness runs through the body of the car to the engine compartment is a small circle that looks like you can run wire through it. What I did was I poked a small hole through that piece of rubber. Next, we need to move under the hood. Just to the left and above that clutch switch is this small little nurple that we're gonna need to deal with. So what I did was I took a box cutter and just made a small slice in it. This is the other side of that tiny hole that we made on the interior of the car. Now what we can do is we can take our harness and we can push it through the first side inside the car and then keep going and push it through to the outside of the car. That'll allow our wire to pass through and we can pull as much as we're going to need up into the engine compartment. Now I know what you're saying. You're probably worried, Charles, what if water leaks in and a bunch of other crazy critters get in my car? Well, your car's probably gonna leak water from your sunroof long before this is a problem, but that's a good point. And when we're all wrapped up, we can take some silicone or something, put a little dab on it, that'll seal it up, and then we can use that also to kind of hold this little piece of foam we tore, or do a better job than I did and don't tear yours in the first place. Now that we've got that wire through our firewall, next we're going to route that wire underneath this tray. That way it's nice and hidden hidden. Probably want to use your best judgment on this for yourself. I like my stuff a certain way, but now that wire's all tucked through here. I'll probably leave this with more length like this, so that no matter where we put this box, we have enough cable. Now with that wire all installed, I'm gonna put everything back because that'll give us a better picture of how we wanna route everything. Last thing I wanna do is route everything with the tray and the intake off and then have to take it all back out and do it a second time. Now here's our jimble jamble of wires. Let's go ahead and get this guy plugged in. Just doing this to kind of see what everybody looks like. So the one with the white and black wires is the turbine speed sensor. That's the one that goes back there to the turbo. The one with, what is that? Red, black, and yellow, that goes down to our charge pressure sensor. Let's actually get this one plugged in. It's back there, it's hard to see. There is also a gray lock on the connector. And also, of course, your coolant hose is right there. So be mega careful. Mega. I'm going to show you how to disconnect this with this connector right here. So this is going to be plugged in back behind the turbocharger, but just so you can see what you need to do, you'll need to lift this gray tab up like that and then squeeze it and pull the connector. Something else I just realized, when you take the connector off the turbine sensor, it's plugged in this way, which means the lock is on the side towards the cabin of the car. You have to plug it in this way for it to actually go on based on this channel right here. And there is a lock on the turbo side of that. So whether that's better or worse, I don't know. For that charge pressure sensor, we're gonna have to take the belly pan off. That was less loud than I thought. 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 Yeah. I was like, what the hell is this? This is our OBD2 wire. Nope, it's like a USB plug. You always get it right the third time. Sure. So I don't even know why I'm messing with this. Why do I even care so much? You know why I care? Because it's important. And it's important to set a good example for the kids at home. If you didn't hear that, Eli's like, I think you care because you're neurotic about it. Let's get this guy back on and up. Now, in order to install either the Bluetooth module or the laptop cable, you gotta open up the box to do that, but that's super easy. Just be careful you don't lose these tiny little screws down in the abyss of your engine compartment. Okay, so they make a really big deal about this piece not being in contact with the metal box or any metal at all. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna put it in here. Hopefully that doesn't mess our Bluetooth signal up. Is this necessary? Probably not. Are we doing it anyway? Definitely. And then they want you to aim this back at the car. What I think I'm gonna do is, I think for now, we're gonna just kind of set this back here. This isn't gonna stay like this. We're gonna move things around, but remember, we got an intake to put on this car, so we'll have to adjust this anyway. Next up, we get to do the part that I kind of forgot to tell you about earlier, and that's download a $30 application to actually make this work. So that $150 Bluetooth dingamajig that we had to buy is actually more like $180 by the time you get all the goodies. Oh, sorry, $27.99. Let us get a battery charger on it and play around and see what we got. Okay, I have the app here. Let's make sure we're connectatroned. Error, not connected. Okay, how do we connect this thing? Connect. Please register and log. Oh, geez. Okay. I don't know if you just saw on the screen here, it actually popped up with map number 1, map 1. So here's our different maps right here. Map 0, factory tune. Map 1 is 91 octane, plus 3 PSI of boost. 2 is plus 4 PSI. 3 is 4.5. 4 is 6 PSI on 93 to E30. Map 5 is a little bit more boost and E30. And then map 6 is custom tune. Now, this one also does water meth injection, which is really, really awesome. Something that maybe in the future we'll play with. There is also map 6, which is custom tuning. Now, I reached out to JB4 and asked them about that. They haven't got anything available yet for this car, but if you're working on something older, that may be a route that you want to go. We're going to leave it on map 1 right now. I think we need to go drive it and check it out. Data. I mean, if this worked, it's kind of awesome that you can just flip on the fly different maps. We're boosting 5 PSI right now. Just drive the car stock. It's so great. There's no need to even mess with anything. Just leave it alone. You'll be happier, healthier, and have more money in your pocket. Gee. Let's try that again. So after a quick update, it looks like we now have all of the things that we need. Now we have RPM, now we have air fuel, we still have IAT. Okay, if that's map 0 and the other map was map 1, I don't know if there is a difference, but that felt smoother to me than the other one or something. So here's what I think the takeaway is. We got it to work. It should be working as well as it's gonna work. I don't really feel a whole lot of difference. The ultimate test is when we take it to the dyno, which we're gonna do right now. All right, we're back at the dyno, and here's our plan. We're talking with the JB4 folks. It seems that starting off with the highest map and working our way down is going to give us maybe the best results. Honestly, I really don't know. On the way here, we were driving it in map 2, and the throttle did feel a bit more snappy. We might even throw a racing line intake on it and see if that does anything for us too. Okay, so our first run on map 4, we had a max of 344.92 torque and 301.8 horsepower. You can see this blue line is what we ran factory last time we were here. So we gained overall a little less than 70 pound-feet of torque and what is that, 8 horsepower. If we look at our graphs, you can see they're pretty smooth and even. Once we get about here, we start to get a little woggly. Then we kind of come down. And what's interesting is how much is happening right here. I don't know if this is because we've tricked the ECM into doing something different with the JB4 or what, but we're going to run it again and see what happens with this back end here. And we'll kind of follow that along as we move down through our different maps. Compared to the factory one, though, look at how smooth our factory lines are and then how woggly our JB4 lines are. They still do kind of follow the same curvature where it comes up, then drops a little bit, and then kind of comes down. Bro, what happened there? We got a bunch more horsepower, but look what happened. We had a crash in power and torque, and then a spike back up. Okay, so that was map 4. Initially, I was gonna put the intake on and run it in map 4, but with that giant plunge of power and torque, clearly something went sideways. What it seems is like the throttle body actually closed a bit at that point because it hit some sort of fail-safe. So we're gonna go down to map 3. We're gonna run it on map 3. Then I think I'm going to do intake on map 3, and let's hope for something a little better, because that makes me uneasy, because I'm scared. $339 and $329. So we're a little bit down, about 6 pound-feet of torque down from map 4, but we're actually way up in horsepower. And this is starting to feel like it is a little bit smoother than that map 4. So that's actually pretty good for what it is. Okay, so our map 3 was way better than map 4. That could be a product of map 4 really wanting to have E85. What I'm gonna do now is I'm going to put on the racing line turbo inlet pipe and the pipe that goes to the airbox. We're gonna do that with the factory airbox first. Then we take that factory airbox out, put the R600 intake on it. We're gonna do 2 more runs with just the inlet pipe and then with the whole entire thing, and then work our way down to what our factory map is. Now, we did a bunch more dyno runs, and here's a summary of how it went. On map 3, with inlet only, 339 pound-feet of torque and 328 horsepower, meaning that we actually lost 1 horsepower with the inlet. Next, with the full intake, 342 pound-feet of torque and 337 horsepower. So we gained about 4 pound-feet of torque and 9 horsepower. Leaving the full intake on, we move down to map 1, which is the map that comes installed on the JB4. So if you don't buy any of that extra add-on stuff, this is the map you're gonna get. We hit 325 pound-feet of torque and 319 horsepower. I also wanted to get an idea of what kind of power we might gain with the turbo inlet and intake only. So we moved down to map 0, and we actually saw something super interesting. We hit 303 pound-feet of torque and 313 horsepower. Now, this seemed like a really big gain over what we got on our just straight up stock car, or with the exhaust, because it was pretty much the same. The conclusion that we drew is that even on map 0, the JB4 is doing something. Okay, so with the results of map 0 and the intake, it seemed a little odd. So what we did was we went ahead and disconnected the entire JB4 unit. We're gonna do battery voodoo to kind of reboot the whole car. We're gonna do one final run, stock file, intake only and see if we actually got 20 horsepower from just an intake. I'm mega skeptical, so I don't think that's what happened. So blue was our stock run before. Look at what we're getting with just the intake all throughout the band. Almost over 30 pound-feet of torque, 11 horsepower at kind of this spot right here. Look at these numbers. How is this possible from just an intake? Unreal. But notice it's considerably smoother than with the JB4. This is JB4 completely disconnected from the car and battery voodoo. That's insane. I would have lost money on that bet if somebody wanted to bet me money on it, by the way. Okay, so you're probably thinking, Charles, is just like that double rainbow. What does it all mean? So when we look at an installation, it's super simple. Minus routing that wire through the bulkhead, that was really the only kind of challenging part of the entire job. This unit does add horsepower. Not only did our dyno prove that, but the butt dyno also confirmed that as well. When we look at the cost on dollar per horsepower, here's what it boils down to. The JB4 unit plus the Bluetooth thing, plus the app that you have to buy, which should be included with it, in my opinion. When you add all those up, it's like 720 bucks. Depending on what map you're going, you can get really probably even better than about 20 bucks per horsepower, which is actually pretty good. Now, dyno numbers, in my opinion, don't tell the whole story. They will give you peak horsepower, they will give you peak torque, they will allow you to look at the graph and see where these numbers are existing during your acceleration point. However, that's not everything, right? Some things that concern me about this JB4, especially in those higher maps, we had some pretty unstable graphing going on, so that gives me a little bit of concern. If we remember what our factory graph looked like, that arch is real smooth. There were some things at the dyno that, boy, if we could travel back in time and just spend endless time at the dyno, I would really like to do. I would have loved to take that intake completely back off, reran the dyno to see if those numbers on the intake were actually what we were getting. I actually don't really fully know how to explain the results that we got at the dyno. Traditionally with intakes on these cars, Mark 7, Mark 8, even Mark 6, you're not seeing those kind of numbers to the wheels with an intake. You're just not. But the numbers are what they are. I have to say I'm worried about the clutch. We didn't experience any clutch slipping issues, but a known problem on Mark 7, and we're basically on the same setup with Mark 8, so that's something that probably going to have to consider. So overall, it did what it said it was going to do. It does give you a lot more flexibility than going into it. I actually probably would have given that JB4 credit for. If you're trying to do this on a brand new car that either we don't have ECM tunes for yet or is still under warranty, this really might be the best option because it doesn't necessarily leave traces of new firmware, new software like an ECM flash would. My Mark 7 was flagged very early in its life because I had an ECM tune, where with this you could just take it out of the car. Traditionally, and I may have already said this before, traditionally I was like, nope, don't buy the Piggyback. Just get your ECM properly tuned. That's a better way to go. While I still feel that way, the JB4 does present some pretty significant advantages and things that are definitely worth considering, especially because we don't even have an ECM tune option at this point for these cars. But if you're looking at older cars like Mark 7, I would still rather have a proper ECM tune. And on that note, I really hate the idea of taking a JB4 or any Piggyback module and adding that on top of an ECM tune. Now you're tricking a modified file, and I really don't like that. Stick to one or the other, I think, is going to give you the best performance. Because remember, it's not just about top horsepower numbers. How is the drivability? How is the cold start? You could actually feel on that map 4 the car breaking up a little bit, where it felt like it was cutting timing back under heavy acceleration at higher RPM. We saw that in our dyno graph. So these are all things that you're going to want to take into account. I think if you just want to go map 1, send it, you're going to be fine. Even on map 3, it seemed to perform pretty well. The throttle felt a little twitchy at times. Twitchy is kind of the best way I could describe it. The throttle felt a little twitchy at times, so that's going to be something you want to be aware of as well. With that, I'm out. Links to everything down in the description as always. Have an awesome day. I'll talk to you again next time. Did I get everything on my notes?